Have you ever felt your spirit whispering that something wasn't right, but you stayed anyway? You saw the signs, the late replies, the cold tone, the broken promises. But instead of walking away, you told yourself it's just a phase, or worse, maybe it's me. You silenced your gut and called it loyalty. You ignored the discomfort and called it love. But let me ask you, how many times do you have to betray yourself just to keep someone who's not afraid to lose you? We don't always miss the red flags because we're blind. Sometimes we see them clearly, but we're just too afraid to walk away. So we pretend. We create illusions. We fall in love with potential, with memories, with who they could be, instead of accepting who they keep showing up as. But every time you ignore what you feel, you choose the pain that follows. And that pain, that's the consequence of your silence, of choosing fear over truth, of staying in places your soul has outgrown. This isn't about blame, it's about awakening, about realizing that love that costs your peace is too expensive. And today I want you to take your power back. Not through anger, not through revenge, but by finally listening to yourself again. They always show you. In the beginning, they always show you. Maybe not with their words, but with their tone. With the way they disappear for days without explanation. With how they dodge accountability when they mess up. With how you feel small every time you bring up your needs. You feel it in your chest. In that quiet whisper that says, something isn't right. That is a red flag. And not a red flag for you to fix. It's a red flag for you to leave. But most people don't, especially women, because society taught us that love means sacrifice, that a good woman holds the family together, that we should be more understanding, more patient, more tolerant. And so when a man disrespects you once, you say, he's just stressed. When he ignores your boundaries, you say he just needs time. When he lies, you say at least he came back. Every time you rationalize a red flag, you teach your heart to betray itself. You teach your spirit that pain is love. You start believing that you have to earn what should be freely given. Respect, presence. Let me ask you something. Why do you believe it's your job to repair what someone else keeps breaking? Why do you think it's noble to stay even when your soul is screaming for you to go? Because you've been conditioned to be loyal to everything but yourself. But here's the thing. Red flags don't disappear just because you ignore them. They evolve. They grow. That moment he raised his voice in frustration will one day be the moment he breaks things. That little lie about where he was last night will turn into whole chapters of deception. That first time you caught him flirting online, it becomes real-world betrayal. You saw it coming, you felt it, but you stayed. And that doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But now that you know better, you must choose better. Red flags are not puzzles. They're not opportunities for you to prove how much you can tolerate. They're signals, warnings, a chance for you to turn around before you lose yourself completely. And sometimes we ignore them because we're scared of being alone. We think, maybe this is as good as it gets. But that belief, that love must hurt, is the very thing chaining you to people who will never cherish you. You need to stop glorifying potential. You need to stop believing that love will magically fix someone who refuses to fix themselves. Because no matter how beautiful your intentions are, no matter how much patience you pour into them, you cannot heal a person who benefits from keeping you confused. And some people do. Some people know exactly what they're doing. They test you with disrespect early on just to see how much you'll allow. They break your boundaries piece by piece so you'll stop defending them. And before you know it, you're in a relationship that's draining the life out of you, but you're too tired, too scared, too attached to walk away. But let me tell you this, the longer you ignore the red flags, the more violent the storm gets. The more comfortable they get mistreating you, the more you lose yourself trying to keep the peace. And here's the harsh truth. Staying is also a choice, a painful one. When you ignore the signs, you're no longer a victim of their behavior. You become a participant in your own heartbreak. You deserve a love that doesn't make you anxious, a love that doesn't require detective work, a love that doesn't ask you to shrink so they can feel bigger. But first, you must recognize that love doesn't start with them. It starts with how you treat yourself. When you raise your standards, red flags stop looking like challenges. They start looking like exits. And that's the kind of clarity you need. So if you're watching this and you're still in that space where the flags are flying, but you're telling yourself it's just the wind, this is your wake-up call. Don't wait until the pain is unbearable to choose peace. Choose it now. Because the sooner you stop fixing people who don't want to be fixed, the sooner you start saving yourself. Sometimes it's not that you can't see the red flags, it's that you choose not to. You ignore them because deep down, you want this to work so badly. You want to be chosen, validated, loved. You've invested so much emotionally that the thought of walking away feels like failure. And so you stay. You hope, you try harder. But here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Your desire to be chosen is blinding you to reality. You start focusing on potential. You cling to the idea of who they could be instead of accepting who they consistently show up as. You replay the good moments like a highlight reel in your mind, convincing yourself that they're still that person. But if we're honest, those good moments are now rare. They come just often enough to keep you attached, never enough to feel secure. And that's not love, that's emotional manipulation wrapped in hope. Love isn't supposed to be confusing. You shouldn't have to decode text messages or overanalyze silence. You shouldn't feel anxious every time they don't call back. But when you crave love more than you value peace, you'll settle for emotional crumbs and call it a feast. You'll explain away disrespect and call it a rough patch. You'll sacrifice your needs to maintain a version of the relationship that only exists in your head. But let me ask you this. Why are you working so hard to be loved by someone who's showing you every day that they don't truly see you? Why are you rewriting your personality just to become more likable to a person who can't even show up emotionally? Why are you editing your boundaries to keep someone who wouldn't even flinch if you walked away? You know what happens when you don't believe you're enough as you are? You start accepting less than you deserve. You make excuses for them. You start carrying the weight of both people in the relationship. And eventually, you begin to think their love is something you have to earn. But let me be very clear. You do not have to audition for love. You don't have to mold yourself into someone more agreeable, quieter, more forgiving, more flexible, just to make someone stay. Real love doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't feed on your insecurities and grow from your self-abandonment. Many of us were never taught what healthy love looks like, so we confuse emotional chaos for passion. We think jealousy is proof that someone cares. We think controlling behavior means he just loves me too much. No, real love feels safe. Real love is consistent. And real love is not afraid of your strength. It embraces it. The problem is, when you desperately want to be chosen, you put yourself last. You ignore the fact that you haven't been happy in months. You ignore how often you cry, how drained you feel, how much you miss your old self. because leaving feels like loss. But the truth is, staying in something that robs you of your peace is the real loss. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. When you stop begging to be loved and start walking in your worth, everything changes. You no longer stay in situations hoping they'll wake up and see your value. You realize it's not about being chosen, it's about choosing yourself enough to walk away from what doesn't honor you. You're not too emotional. You're not asking for too much. You're just finally noticing what your spirit has been trying to tell you. And maybe it's time to listen. Because ignoring what you feel just to keep someone in your life is the slowest form of self-abandonment. You lose pieces of yourself bit by bit until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman staring back. The harsh reality is this: if you continue to let your need to be chosen overpower your need for peace, you will keep attracting people who take advantage of that need. You'll keep chasing people who don't value you. And the longer you chase them, the further you run from yourself. You don't have to be the girl who stays. You can be the woman who finally says, no more. No more shrinking. No more ignoring. No more waiting for someone to see your worth when it's been shining all along. You can't heal in the same place that's hurting you. No matter how much you love someone, no matter how much history you've built, staying in an environment that constantly wounds your spirit will never give you the peace you're craving. It's like trying to recover from smoke inhalation while refusing to leave the burning house. You keep hoping the fire will go out, but you're the one turning a blind eye to the flames. There's this dangerous lie we're taught, especially as women, that love means staying no matter what. That true commitment is about enduring pain, fighting through chaos, being patient while someone figures out how to love you properly. But that's not healing. That's slow emotional death. That's sacrificing your well-being at the altar of someone else's dysfunction. You can't be the therapist, the lover, the savior, and the emotional punching bag all in one. That's not your role. And if you're staying in a relationship thinking you'll eventually fix what's broken, ask yourself this: who's helping you heal? While you're busy tending to their wounds, who's holding space for yours? While you're overextending yourself to be understood, who's truly understanding you? The truth is, healing requires safety. It requires softness. And when you're constantly walking on eggshells, questioning your worth, or being emotionally starved, you're not healing, you're surviving. And survival mode isn't sustainable. It's exhausting. It drains the very parts of you that need nourishment. It steals your confidence. It blurs your identity. It makes you think that this is the best you'll ever get. But you weren't made to live in emotional survival mode. You were made for peace, for purpose, for power. You were made for love that doesn't ask you to bleed. But here's the hard part. Healing requires separation. It requires stepping away from the people, places, and habits that are delaying your growth. It requires you to be honest enough to say, this isn't good for me, no matter how much I want it to be. And that's where most people get stuck, because walking away feels like defeat. But really, it's the beginning of your freedom. Too many women stay because they think leaving is giving up. But what if staying is the real betrayal? What if the longer you remain in that space, the more you're teaching yourself that this version of love, broken, inconsistent, confusing, is all you're worthy of? And what if your healing can't begin until you finally get tired enough to say, I'm done choosing pain? Sometimes we confuse struggle for love. We think that if it's not hard, it's not real. But love that constantly hurts you is not love. It's a lesson. And once you've learned it, staying becomes a decision, not a sacrifice. Healing begins the moment you choose truth over illusion, the moment you stop romanticizing someone's potential and start confronting their patterns. And let's talk about those patterns. How many times have they said they'll change, only to hurt you again in the same way? How many times have you forgiven, overlooked, minimized, and silenced yourself to avoid conflict? And yet, the behavior keeps repeating. That's not growth, that's a cycle. And cycles don't break themselves, you break them. By deciding you deserve better. You can't truly start healing until you leave the environment that's keeping you wounded. You have to walk away from the table where love is served with side dishes of confusion, neglect, and emotional manipulation. You need to unlearn the belief that your worth is based on how much you can endure. Because the truth is, you were never meant to heal in a place that sees your brokenness as convenient. The moment you choose yourself is the moment you start healing. Not when they finally say sorry, not when they realize what they lost, not when they beg you to stay. Your healing begins when you stop begging for the bare minimum and start building a life that feels like safety, not survival. And no, it won't be easy. You'll miss them. You'll question yourself. You'll have moments where you want to go back, because pain can feel familiar, even comfortable. But don't mistake familiarity for peace. Don't confuse history for compatibility. Just because you spent time with someone doesn't mean they were meant to stay forever. Give yourself permission to heal somewhere new, somewhere quiet, somewhere sacred. Even if that means sitting alone with your pain, at least it will be pain with purpose. At least it will be the kind of pain that leads to growth instead of the kind that keeps you stuck. Healing doesn't just mean walking away. It also means staying away, because there will come a time when you finally muster the courage to leave, to cut off what's been draining you. But the real battle, the one that happens after, when the silence starts to speak, when the loneliness feels louder than the love you left behind, that's when your heart will try to convince you to go back. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. That's why healing isn't just about leaving toxic people, it's about not going back to them the next time your phone feels too quiet or your bed feels too cold. Because pain has a way of echoing all your doubts. It makes you romanticize the chaos you escaped. It makes you forget why you left. You'll start remembering the smiles and the laughter, but your mind will block out the nights you cried yourself to sleep. You'll miss the way they held you, but forget the way they ignored your needs. Healing requires emotional discipline. It asks you to protect your progress, even from your own nostalgia. Because let's be real, sometimes it's not them reaching out, it's you reaching back. It's you scrolling through old messages, reliving the what ifs. It's you checking their social media, trying to decode their silence. But that's not healing. That's self-sabotage, disguised as longing. You left for a reason, and you don't need another heartbreak to remind you of that. The version of you that stayed was in survival mode. The version of you that walked away is stepping into freedom. And the version of you that stays away, that's the one who's finally choosing peace over patterns. You don't have to answer every apology. You don't have to explain yourself to people who never tried to understand you. Closure doesn't always come in conversations. Sometimes it's a decision. A quiet moment where you say, I don't need this story to end the way I want it. I just need it to end. Healing means building a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for someone else to realize your worth. It means filling your space with things that feed your spirit. Peaceful routines, honest friends, quiet reflection, and love that doesn't hurt. It means reminding yourself that your worth didn't disappear just because someone couldn't see it. There will be days when you feel weak, when your mind starts playing old songs that remind you of them, when your heart wants to believe they've changed. But don't let your progress get swallowed by your loneliness. Growth is messy, but pain that leads to peace is better than pleasure that ends in more pain. Every time you resist the urge to go back, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Every time you say no more, you break the cycle that tried to keep you stuck. And one day, you'll wake up and realize that you no longer miss them. You miss the version of yourself that believed that love had to hurt. But now, you know better. You know love should feel like safety, not survival. It should sound like consistency, not confusion. It should hold you, not haunt you. So don't let time make you forget what broke you. Don't let loneliness convince you to settle for the same story. You've made it this far. Stay away. Stay healing. Stay growing. Because you weren't created to shrink yourself into relationships that suffocate your soul. You weren't designed to be someone's emotional rehab. You are not a place people go to fix themselves. You are a whole, worthy, powerful being who deserves love that doesn't require constant recovery. You've spent enough nights questioning your worth, enough days shrinking your voice just to keep someone who was never even reaching for your hand. But now, it's time to come back home to yourself. You don't need to beg for love. You don't need to earn someone's presence by sacrificing your truth. The red flags you once ignored were never meant to break you. They were there to wake you, to remind you that your peace matters, that your softness deserves protection, that your love is valuable, and it's time you started treating it that way. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to choose yourself without guilt. And the next time you see a red flag, don't just look, move, because the version of you that honors your worth is the version who finally stops choosing pain.